Matthew Gregory Lewis is best remembered today as the author of the scandalous, outrageous, erotic, pornographic, blasphemous novel The Monk of 1796. Critics have long speculated about the sexuality of Matthew Gregory Lewis, and in the 1930s, Montague Summers quite equivocally argued that Lewis was what we would today call homosexual. However we define him, I think it's very clear that Lewis had a very passionate relationship with the son of a fellow Gothic novelist, Isabella Kelly. Isabella Kelly had been supported by Lewis, but Lewis almost enters into a kind of informal adoption of Isabella Kelly's son, William, and pays for his education and supports him in other ways. And this particularly has been subject to a kind of critical queering. Now, what happens in Lewis's fiction, particularly in his poetry, some of his published poems, but also his unpublished poetry, is a very, very strong queer homoerotic subtext. But in the better-known example of The Monk, there is very definitely a sense of queer desire that circulates in that text. In The Monk, the eponymous monk by the name of Ambrosio falls in love initially, or is at least attracted to, another young monk who enters into the convent or the monastery into which, in which he's living. This monk is named Rosario, and no sooner have they met than desire starts to circulate between them, and then eventually Rosario comes out as a woman. So you've got a start of a kind of trans-Gothic mentality coming through there. But despite this kind of shift in genders, the play of desire and the play of sexuality continues throughout the text. This queer desire, though, is juxtaposed with a kind of heterosexual romance. So you've got a very strong distinction between the perversity of queer desire, of homoerotic desire, between Rosario and Ambrosio, versus a much more chaste, salutary, heterosexual romance. And I think what this suggests is that the early Gothic writing tradition, as queer as it is never comfortable with coming out. It will always capitulate in favor of heterosexual romance and express in that regard a great ambivalence towards the attractions that these writers themselves seem to harbor.